Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Ron.
I'm Jay.
And we are here to talk about Pontypool. Starring Stephen McHattie, Lisa Houle, I should have looked up how to say her name, Georgina Riley, and Rick Roberts. Written by Tony Burgess and Bruce McDonald, and directed by Bruce McDonald. A real double threat here today. Released in March 2009 on a budget of $1.5 million, it only grossed $35,000 at the box office, but has become kind of a cult streamer hit. At least it's a hit with people like me who have seen it. Jay, did you know that this movie existed before I brought it to you 10 plus years ago or whenever it was I first started to badger you about
No, I did not know it existed. I do remember you talking about it, and as I went to watch it, I thought, well, I've seen this before, so this should be, just recap. And I realized very quickly that no, I have not seen this. I had conflated it with something else that you had recommended to me. I think I know what that was. A movie called Green Room, which I do want to put on our stay tuned list. But I thought for a minute, I was like, oh, isn't this with like the attack and they get into the back? I was like, oh no, that's Green Room. I've never seen this before. I don't know what is happening. And I was not prepared for a movie that takes place entirely in a radio production studio. I thought we were going to do other things, but this movie, 90% of it is in that studio, and I was not ready for that.
Did that bring back any memories for you, Jay?
A little bit. I was never an on-air DJ for anything. I did a lot of sports broadcasting. I've talked about it on various shows and stuff, and I was the in-studio producer for years for Tallahassee Tigers high school football. And I spent the first part of my radio stuff actually being the play-by-play guy for several schools at another town. And then I knew the folks in Tallahassee when I moved closer there. I ended up being the Friday night producer. So I did the pregame show and, get them back and forth, and I would keep up with scores throughout the night. And, I was sort of the sunshine chopper guy, but without the, sketchy past. And occasionally we'd have to do the post-game stuff when the guys who ran the post-game show were a little late getting back from the game or something. But yeah, it was a little bit of memories. I didn't have a producer in my ear. I was the producer in the guys at the stadium's ear. So the memory I have of that most, Ron, is I used a splitter for my headphones, and one ear was the live feed from the stadium and one ear was the live on the radio. So in one ear, I'm hearing commercials. The other ear, I'm hearing the sound of the stadium, and I would drive home at night and I could recite the commercials in my sleep. So it was a little bit of memory like that. And I think that's one of the hardest things about working in radio or even TV and stuff is there's constantly people talking to you while you're talking, which is a hard thing to learn how to do.
Yeah, that definitely seems like that would be kind of a difficult thing to do. But so that would make you kind of the Sidney Breyer of Alabama high school football.
Well, not Alabama high school football, just that one town. But yeah, and I still listen to those guys to this day. They had a rough season this year. I hate that, but it was fun to kind of get back in that world and go like, oh yeah. But moreover, it reminded me of all the radio, television, film classes I took as an undergrad and them teaching you how to work a radio station. And back in those days, man, it was cart tapes and you actually learning how to fade an actual record and all that kind of stuff. I probably could still do it if I had to, but thankfully by the time I got, in a studio again, it was all digital and you were just moving lines up and down a block of like an Excel file that was just a big production block.
That's pretty fun stuff. Funnily enough, the only person I think I've badgered for longer to watch this movie than Jay would be my wife, who even before we were dating, I think I was like, look, you need to see this movie and it's great. And she had never seen it until I watched it for the show. And I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and watch this for the show. Did you ever watch it? She was like, no. So she sat down and watched it with me. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say it kind of blew her mind a little bit. And, funny enough, as we're watching it, I'm getting texts from Jay, and he's saying things fairly similar to some of the stuff that Holly was saying about this movie, just really just messing with her brain. But
Yeah.
before we get into actually talking about the movie, I think I need to do a little plot summary.
Please do.
Have you ever had a word stuck in your head and it drove you absolutely mental? Well, Grant Mazzy knows how you feel. He's a radio DJ in the small town of Pontypool, Ontario, and words are his business. Business isn't good. Grant is a big fish in a small pond, and he's getting more and more strangled every day as his take no prisoners attitude clashes with the conservative needs of the small town he entertains during his morning radio show. While the show's technical producer person, Laurel Ann, loves it, the show's actual producer, Sidney Breyer, isn't a big fan. Pontypool doesn't need shock jock antics. It needs school closings, community theater spots, and kin overhead in the sunshine chopper. It's calm and peaceful most of the time. But an armed standoff down by the ice fishing shacks kicks off a wave of weird events in the town, culminating with a bunch of angry, chanting Pontypoolers surrounded the offices of Dr. John Mendez, tearing the place down while Ken watches from above, or from a fictionalized version of above. Things only get weirder from there as Ken is driven into hiding, and a weird French announcement cuts into the station signal. Since they're Canadian, they can translate live on the air. Stay indoors, avoid family members, don't use terms of endearment or engage in rhetorical discourse, don't speak English, and above all, don't translate this message.
Feels like don't feed him after midnight is what that is right there.
Yeah, but it's don't feed him after midnight after you already gave a pile of ham sandwiches.
Yes.
Grant, fed up with the increasingly weird situation, attempts to leave the station, only to be driven back inside by a horde of Pontypoolers who close on the station, repeating phrases picked up from Grant and Signy's argument. The three of them hole up in the station, trying to make sense of the senseless. And Pontypool goes from a quiet town to a worldwide event, becoming the top story on the BBC and the talk of the English-speaking world. Grant pulls himself together, but Laurel Ann begins to crack under the pressure, perseverating on words and behaving oddly. Things escalate once Dr. Mendez breaks into the radio station and starts to exposition for everyone. The virus has spread through language, and Laurel Ann, she's been exposed. She pounds on the sound booth to try to get in, but when she's unable to pass her disease onto a new victim, she throws up a copious amount of blood and drops dead. Fascinating for Dr. Mendez, but horrifying for everyone else. The virus can't propagate without a host to understand, he explains. Unfortunately, Pontypool has a lot of people that speak English, and they are all trying to get to Grant and company. A bright idea leads to them playing a loop of Grant's voice outside of the studio on the speakers, and the horde is drawn away, for the most part. Dr. Mendez begins to show signs of the virus, focusing on the word breathe until he realizes what's happening and switches to Armenian to ward off the disease. Sidney and Grant switch to Pidgin French to avoid the same fate, and when the mob returns, Dr. Mendez, instead of going crazy, lures them away, allowing Grant and Sidney to survive in the equipment room, speaking to one another in French while demolishing Grant's breakfast scotch. When Sidney succumbs to her alcohol and slips into drunken English, she starts to show signs of catching the virus, perseverating on the word kill. But knowing that the virus is spread by comprehension, Grant starts a bit of fast talking. Kill is kiss. Kill is kiss. Kill is kiss. When Sidney asks Grant to kill her, he knows he saved her and unlocked the key to saving the world. Grant and Sid rush back into the studio, and Grant starts doing what every morning show sounds like to me. He's spouting authentic frontier gibberish to try and confuse the people with Sidney's help. Unfortunately, the French-speaking military troops outside think Grant is sick, and they decide to stop the broadcast the only way they know how. They count down from 10 and blow up the station. Thus, the Grant Mazzy show ends. Or does it? At the end of the movie, after the credits, we see Sidney and Grant, or rather, we see Lisa and Johnny Deadeyes speaking in a confusing sort of disconnected English to ward off the virus that, according to the BBC, has already spread to England and beyond. As credits roll.
Well, bravo at explaining that, because I had a lot of questions when I watched this again, thinking it was something else, and once I finally realized, no, I haven't seen this before, I really locked in, and I I don't know what the inspiration was for this, for Bruce McDonald and company, but I feel like this owes a good debt to the 28 days later kind of vibe of things, because it's that I knew we were doing a zombie thing, right? But we're not doing Romero style zombie. We're doing more of it's almost like Stephen King's The Stand kind of thing going on here too. There's a short bit in the book and in the movie about a radio station host who's trying to tell people the truth, and the army breaks in and shoots them on air and all this stuff. And I don't know, I just felt like, okay, this is sort of this idea of last frontier, that the Canadian Howard Stern would be our last hope in the zombie apocalypse in bum fumble nowhere.
Yeah, that's an interesting novelty, I think. Yeah, I do get a little bit of The Stand. I get a little bit of the doomed television station from Romero's Dawn of the Dead, as they're trying to report the truth to people while people are trying to shut down the truth, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it's it's based off a book called Pontypool Changes Everything by Tony Burgess, the screenwriter who adapted his own work. And I've not read the book, but I'd be curious to see like how close to the source material this is, and what made the cut from the source material and what didn't. But the thing is, the thing that does make the cut, at least, is the way that the virus is spread, right? It spreads in the spoken word, and it's spread based off of comprehension, and that's kind of the key, the linchpin that we get expositioned at us.
Yeah, can I tell you how smart I think that is too? Like, usually viruses are spread through, airborne ways, like the way we know viruses are blood, or they have to bite you, or, it's any number of ways these zombie things go down, right? It can be a disease, all this stuff. And the idea that it's going to be hung around language in a place that is bilingual by nature, but is the lead character is sort of oppressively using English and kind of battering his audience with his English language stuff, is a really smart play on all of this. Like, I thought, setup wise, okay, this is different. This is cool. This has got a little bit of some of that, like, early Tarantino kind of vibe, the way he's spitting out dialogue and sort of being, I don't know,
snappy.
Yeah, it's very James. Like, I felt like Stephen McHattie was giving me a lot of James Remar and a little bit of Jack Conley from The Purge Anarchy, if you remember that dude, Big Daddy. And and also there's like a lot of Richard Crenna in his delivery with things. And for a while I was like, is this someone related to Richard Crenna? I felt like it was, but he's not. Though I didn't realize I had seen Stephen McHattie in a lot of stuff, and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, he's very much a surprising that dude, and he is to me, like, his performance is what absolutely makes this movie work more than anything else. Because he has to be kind of abrasive, he has to be kind of like obnoxious, he has to push back a little bit, but he still has to be likable.
He has to be a diva,
Yeah, it has to be a little bit of I'm too big for this town kind of thing. But he is 100% like, I think, the magic ingredient to this movie. And if you replaced him with someone else, I feel like it doesn't work nearly as well or at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody else could have pulled this off. Lisa Houle and Georgiana Riley are pretty good in their roles and what they do too. But I feel like you could have even swapped them if you wanted to. And I kind of almost wonder if it would have worked better to have the kind of young ex-military, real ambitious person as the producer versus the more veteran person that would have been taking the calls and sort of dealing with the town and all that stuff. Because I felt like the vibe would have changed just a little bit, because he's not going to listen to anybody anyway, but he's definitely not going to listen to the cute one, and all that. And that he's kind of got this little crush fun thing with, but it's never going anywhere vibe. I almost wondered if you flipped them, how that would work.
I think that's a really interesting choice. And I feel like you could have something there, but I also feel like both characters need to have kind of like kind of almost like a familial vibe with Laurel Ann, because you've got Sydney who's trying to, be the boss, but be a little bit tougher. And then Grant's like the fun uncle who's like sneaking booze to her. And it's an interesting, kind of thing. I feel like Sydney moved up from Laurel's position. And when Laurel came back from Afghanistan, she took Sydney's old spot. So I feel like there's some kind of, almost like some history there, or because Laurel Ann was the hometown hero and Grand Marshal of the parade, and I feel like she got back from the war and she needed a job, and she was probably a radio operator or something in Afghanistan, so she had a little bit knowledge of that.
Yeah,
so like, well, you do this, I'll take the producer spot, because if he's going to listen to anyone, it might be me, but he's probably not going to even listen to me. But at least I'll be able to yell at him back more.
Well, the producer's role in a radio show like that or whatever is to be the liaison between like station ownership, advertisers, the community, and then the on-air talent, right? And I've only done a little bit of radio production. The guys I work with were amazing, so we never argued about anything. I mean, we had a great relationship and stuff. But having been in podcasting a long time, and not speaking about anybody on Film Strip, but having produced a lot of podcasts, I've sat in Sydney's role where you have to kind of talk the mercurial person sort of off the ledge a little bit. And I caught her in some of the way she kind of goes at him, and then she backs up and she uses tough love, and then she tries to stroke the ego a little bit. Like I'm sort of remembering like, oh gosh, that's like that one time I tried to do that on that show, and when I did that, and so I felt a little bit for Sydney, because she's the one that's got to be the adult, but she's also got to be fun enough that he'll engage and that they'll keep the thing going, right? Because she does realize like it's a big deal to have this guy in their little radio station, even though he's a pain in the ass. It's a big deal for them to get him. He's obviously gets ratings and stuff, but she's trying to hone him into do your wacky morning DJ thing, but let's put it in the box where we get the school closings out and all that kind of stuff. Which I had a question about that, Ron. This is a place that obviously like where snow is not an anomaly, like where I live, when it happens and we maybe get a dusting and we shut the whole town down for 2 days and stuff. These people live in that all the time. It's not uncommon for where you live too. Y'all get more snow than we do. Why would you need to announce school closings when wouldn't they just be open all the time anyway? This is Ontario where snow lives forever. It's like the North Pole.
I feel like in a lot of places like that, the thing that they'll do is they'll not provide transportation.
That makes sense.
So they won't.
Yeah,
it won't necessarily be a school closing. It'll be a you bring your own kid to school.
Gotcha. No bus action happening.
Yeah, because even in there where they've got the gear for the weather, you don't really want kids standing on the corner waiting for a bus for an hour.
True. I mean, fishing village too,
And given that the buses are diesel, they're going to have difficulty in that weather.
Yeah. Good point. I hadn't thought about that. So, but I mean, the thing that works most about it, the movie in particular, is the smart setup of how the virus is spread, and Dr. Exposition coming in at just the right moment to dump all that for us, but to also not over explain it. Like, I still don't completely understand the rules of engagement with this virus and how they go into this sort of broken dialect back and forth to outsmart him. I get it, but also I almost feel like I need to watch it again to really understand how you outsmart the thing, and can you actually outsmart it eventually? You basically have to reinvent language on the fly for yourself.
Yeah, you have to speak in a confusing code, and the person's going to have to parse through what you're saying to get to what you actually mean.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Edward James Olmos's character from Blade Runner would thrive in this environment. Like he would survive.
Yeah. And I think anybody like appropriately skilled in corporation speak, can maximize their community engagement and facilitate, the people who talk like Tony Robbins.
Let's work on our strategy and initiatives enhancement agreements.
Paradigms.
We'll reshape our paradigms with our performance management action plans and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's very much that kind of. I feel like those kind of people would survive. Like, so it's going to be
consultants.
So it's going to be
and televangelists.
So it's going to be Edward James Olmos, that character. It's going to be all of the OCP board that doesn't get killed by the RoboCop.
And Ed doing on.
And all of the sleaze bags from American Psycho.
Yes, all of those people. Yes, the gentlemen sitting around comparing business cards will all survive until Patrick gets them, as we know. But I did think that was a smart play. And the other thing this movie does is it gives us plenty of time for the setup, and the way that things get in and out of it. You teased it a little bit in the plot summary there, but the Sunshine Chopper is just a guy in his broken down old car who his Dodge Dart, who just likes to provide a service, but he may or may not be a pedophile. I don't know. It's kind of weird, like the way Sidney describes him after we know he's dead.
Well, one of the things they talk about, right, is that it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody about everyone, or everybody knows everything about everyone too. Listen to me. I'm starting to Pontypool.
I would say, you're Pontypooling now. But no, I mean, I did think all the back and forth and the way that they, Grant's trying to push his own agenda, but then coming back away from it and getting more in line with it works well. And then they get us into the whole breaking news, bit, right? Where there's like a police standoff at an ice fishing stand, and Grant makes a big old joke out of it. And because he doesn't take anything seriously, right? But that's the first sign of like the outbreak, right?
Yeah, that's the first sign that something strange is going on. And it's also a first sign that Grant really doesn't understand this community that he's engaging with, because he makes all these jokes about, serial philandering and alcoholism.
Yeah.
And the cops were as drunk as the locals. And it's like, no, that cop actually is an alcoholic, and so on and so forth.
You can't say that on air, here. Maybe you can do that in Toronto, but not in Pontypool,
Yeah, I feel like he had a big spot like in, I don't know, Vancouver or somewhere. And when he lost that job, he had rendered himself like radioactive in the tradition of Don Imus, and he got shipped off to
the complete other side of the country if he's coming from Vancouver.
Yeah, he got shipped off to the hinterlands to like rehab himself.
Yeah, well, he fires his agent, which probably isn't real, but he's pissed because he's got this lousy gig, but it's all he could get. And so he's trying to psych himself up as he's going in for it. We got that opening scene though, man. I got questions because maybe that's the first sign something's wrong, is that woman's, gibberishing at him, and that's how he starts his show. It's like, should I have dialed 911? Should I have not? All that. And is that where it actually begins?
I think that it's implied that that's the first, like, because he's driving out in the middle of nowhere, right? Which is where the ice fishing stands are going to be.
Right.
And he's by a fairly wooded area. So I feel like that may be somebody from the ice fishing stands who comes running over to try to spread the infection before she explodes.
Yeah, which he doesn't really know what's going on at that point. He's just trying to get into his job that he hates and go about his day.
And it's to set up like there's some weirdness happening. Like we get into it right away. This is not going to be a normal Valentine's Day. Which, did you know that this was a Valentine's Day movie when you started watching it?
I did not when I started watching it. And then I saw it coming in. I was like, oh, secret Valentine's movie, which, of course, is while we're doing it, because this is a couple days before Valentine's Day, we're releasing this. So we do celebrate the holidays here on Film Stroke, sometimes in the most obscure ways possible, which is sort of our shtick. I mean, would you expect anything less 14 years in at this point? We did the traditional ones. We did My Bloody Valentine, the remake, and David Boreanaz's Valentine. I mean, someday we'll do the old My Bloody Valentine, but
it's not great.
We should do that in like June. I mean, that's more our speed anyway.
No, more our speed would be like if there was 8 of them, and this was like My Bloody Valentine 4. and we just did them out of order.
Yeah, well, now it is the classic film strip. We would have done them all in order, but now we just kind of do whatever because at this point, why not?
Yeah, classic film strip. We'd still be doing Silent Night, Deadly Night movies, sequels, and spinoffs.
Yeah, I think the first one of those we did was like the sixth one or something like that, or the fourth one, and then we've gone and done the second one now. So
yeah, exactly. It was the fourth one, I think, because I got weirdly obsessed with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also once again, Tubi provides. So as Tubi brings, we do.
Yeah, which one of the things that happens in my household is if something's on Tubi, I'll start to slowly chant Tubi, Tubi, Tubi. And we build up the chant until it's like Tubi, 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 Tubi.
Now that all the streaming sites have started cracking down on password sharing, and my wife and I live and work in different states from each other, I have access to very little. Basically, I get Peacock because she doesn't watch that because I get it for the WWE more or less, and the occasional movie that they'll throw on there from NBC Universal. And then Tubi, is a free. So I spend a lot of time on Tubi and Peacock in my abode now.
One of these days, Jay, we'll have to do a wrestling themed side.
I mean, episode. We've done a couple of episodes here and there. It's been a long time since we did a pure wrestling type movie, though. We might need to get into that. Though the ones that have been made more recently are kind of sad. I'm not about that. I'm more about the fun side. We did the classics that we didn't know, No Holds Barred, Ready to Rumble. So I feel like we've covered two big bases with that.
Did you do the there was a Roddy Piper rock and wrestling tag team movie. He was tag teaming with the Tonga Kid, and there was also a rock band involved. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have not done that. I didn't know that existed. But if we're going to do anything Roddy Piper, it's going to be They Live and the greatest action fight scene of all time with Keith David.
Which my wife had never seen They Live, and she'd also never seen Big Trouble in Little China before we went to a rep screening in Brooklyn. But my wife had never seen They Live, and I was like, oh, okay, strap in.
Yeah.
And then like 20 minutes into the movie, I look over and says, hey, what do you think John Carpenter thought about Ronald Reagan? And she just started laughing hard I had to pause the movie.
But you know what? What's funny is he wasn't entirely wrong, because look at today. Like, John Carpenter's never wrong, just early. That's kind of his whole life.
Yeah, that's his whole thing. And
except for Halloween. That was the one time he got it right.
And I mean, really, he might have been early to that too, because I feel like if Halloween had come out in the middle of the slasher craze instead of starting the slasher craze, I feel like it would have made like $100 million back when that meant something.
Well, I mean, it was the biggest independent film of all time until Star Wars and Blair Witch and all that kind of stuff came along, because technically Star Wars was an independent film, but really, like, it lasted until like Blair Witch existed, in terms of what it was done for. But that's the one time, like, Carpenter, like I said, was a little ahead of his time, or was like just ahead enough that people were ready for it. The rest of the time, he was so far ahead nobody was there, or he was just doing like work for hire. Like Christine is just work for hire. It's a good movie, and it's a pretty good adaptation of a pretty mediocre Stephen King story, but it works because Carpenter makes it creepy as hell, because that's what he does.
Yeah, he really is a genius. I think we all know that now, and he has earned the nickname the Master of Horror.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, but back to Pontypool for a minute.
Pontypool.
Back to Pontypool. I called him Dr. Exposition. I think his name's Mendez. Is that correct? When he broke into Armenian, I was also not prepared for that. I was like, well, that was not what I thought your heritage would be, sir. But okay.
I had no idea what he was, because he looked one way. He talked, his accent suggested another thing. His last name suggested a third thing. Yeah. And then he starts speaking Armenian. It's like, do I really? And I'm like, I actually don't know what Armenians look or sound like real ones. I just know what, like, Kardashian type.
I only know because I watched all the seasons of The Shield, and they were a big player a couple of seasons in there. Like, the Armenian money train was a big thing on the show The Shield, which is a forgotten FX show, I'm afraid. But boy, you talk about something that was way ahead of its time. That show messed up and went there long before a lot of your other favorite ones did. Everybody that loves The Wire needs to go watch The Shield. There's a little commercial there for a streaming service that you can only have one login to at a time. But anyway, I just find it's funny that the thing that was supposed to replace cable has basically become cable again. But
cable, but worse. Yeah.
Yes, cable, but worse. But this movie, as it progresses, starts to get into places though that I guess if we're in the part where like what didn't work for me, when Laurel Ann becomes a Zack Snyder zombie, I wasn't prepared for that. Like I knew one of them was going to have to go. Like I was like, well, one of these people's got to die. Obviously, the young cute one is the obvious target, right? But I was not prepared for her to. What was the word you used? You taught me vocabulary tonight. There's a word you used for this that I had never heard before until now, and I googled it as you were talking about. Perseverating, is that
perseverating? Yes.
Please, I do not know that word at all. What does that mean exactly? Tell our audience.
Perseverating basically means that you get a thought or an idea or a thing stuck in your head and you cannot get it out, so it just kind of lives in your brain and you just keep gnawing at it and gnawing at it and gnawing at it.
So this podcast for the last decade and a half of my life.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I did not expect her to go into perseverating mode, and then the way she's just banging against that glass, and because I thought, okay, this is going to go on for a couple minutes and then her head's going to explode or something. They don't have a lot of money, but it'll be some gory effect. And it goes on and it goes on and on. And I really, it was unnerving. Like I wouldn't call this movie scary at all. I would call it mildly unnerving to extremely unnerving at times. And that's when she blows the blood, puke all over the wall and dies. That was, I did not expect that to come. I thought she would just drop.
Yeah, I thought that was very unsettling. And the part where they realize she can't hear us, but she can see us talking. She can see our lips moving, and she might be reading our lips. That brought me back to what you see in the very beginning of the movie, where the infected girl comes stumbling over to, we believe she's infected, comes stumbling over to Grant's car, and she's like making mouth shapes like she's trying to talk to him, but he can't hear her because he's behind the glass.
Yeah,
it was like a nice inverse of that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a smart thing for a movie like this to do, to set up something, to give it no explanation, and then just have your audience come along for it. But I almost needed the handhold of Grant to go, that's just like the woman this morning that I was talking about. Like I almost wanted him to say that, because I had to think about, like, where is this coming from? And I was like, oh, it's just like the chick in the beginning of the movie. Oh, okay, now I got it. But I'm sitting here paying attention to it. I don't know if just casual observer you would catch that.
I feel like this isn't necessarily going to be a movie that's going to that wants to go after like a casual audience. I feel like it's a movie that they're trying to make you pay attention to it and to make you think about, words and language and how you use those things, and what it would be to have a like a landmine in your lexicon.
There's an episode of South Park where they talk about the cursed words, and like the shtick of the show is that everybody is. I think it was at the time when like NYPD Blue was going to use a curse word on network television, right? And it was supposed to be like this big impactful moment, and it was just sort of casually like Dennis Franz just drops shit, or something on the show, and it's no video. So it's in the 5th season. It's called "It Hits the Fan," the South Park, and they make fun of that, and to the point where they've got like a little counter on the show. So every time somebody curses, and it hits a certain amount, and then like all these demons come back, and these knights come back to go. They're called cursed words for a reason. They're cursed. They bring about a curse, and I felt like, I don't know that is what the author or Bruce McDonald were going for, but the way some of this plays reminded me of that and kind of took me back to that place, which was fun. I had a good time with that.
And there's also an episode of Futurama where there's a bomb put inside Bender, and it's keyed to go off when he says his most favorite word, which is ass.
Yeah. See, that's like some Philip K. Dick shit, but mixed with like Howard Stern. I mean, it is the same kind of idea, is that you can't say anything. Well, the short story Imposter is built around like the key terms, like the idea of Manchurian Candidate, somebody, I won't give, if you never read that story, go read it. It's like 15 pages. You'll blow through it in no time. It's really good. They made a terrible movie out of it that was supposed to just be a short, but studios get involved and all of a sudden you got Mekhi Phifer running up and down the streets, but for an hour for no reason. But yeah, the short of that is pretty good with Gary Sinise, but the long version sucks. But anyway, the story's good. And I thought about that idea of like trigger phrases, trigger words, all that stuff, and how language is one of the ultimate weapons, right? We think about viruses being bloodborne or airborne and stuff, but we never think about them being soundborne and language born. And the immediate thing I had a question for was like, well, one, what if you don't speak English at all? Are you safe? Or two, what if you're hearing impaired and you can't hear it? Would reading the lips do enough?
Well, the implication, at least in this movie, is that if you don't speak English, you'll be fine. Unless, of course, the virus is going to spread from English to a different language.
Which is kind of funny, right? Because all the old languages are older than English, historically.
Right. Yeah, and it's in an English speaking, mostly English speaking environment, but I feel like that there's a significant amount of bilingual people in that part of Canada. But it's really an interesting thing, like, because Holly and I were both English majors, so we're both language people, and engaging in rhetorical discourse was like half of what you do in graduate school. So that was really funny to me.
Right. Explain that rule for me real quick for somebody who's not an English major. That's just any kind of back and forth, right? Any sort of discussion.
Any kind of like higher level discussion. So any kind of like, at least I would consider any kind of like more thoughtful, thought-provoking, you have to think hard sort of discussion, like the opposite of what you're just doing, like waiting for an order of chicken wings at a restaurant.
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's as much warning you about not using your brain as it is about not using English, which for most morning show hosts would not be a problem. But for this one, he seems to be a little bit more cerebral in his bits.
Yeah, he's trying to trigger people with his words and push buttons and all of those things. And also, he's trying, as he says, you got to piss people off, because when you piss people off, that's what brings an audience back. And he's not wrong. He's basically being a heel wrestler. As we talk about wrestling for a minute, that's you get heat, and that's what brings in the money. And he's not wrong. He's pretty good at that. I thought that was, again, another really smart twist on the idea of how a virus like this could spread, and how long could you keep up speaking in broken English or broken words and confusing language before you drove yourself mad anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and that's part of what that's part of the reason why at the end of the movie they end up bombing the studio, because they're like, well, he's just talking in gibberish, so he's clearly lost his mind. When he's not lost his mind, he's doing the thing that's going to confuse and repel the virus. But it's so counterintuitive to the way our brains function and the way language functions that it sounds like madness.
Does he pull Sydney back from the brink completely? Was she like starting to go over the edge, and then are you able to reverse it, is what I'm asking?
Yes, that's what he was able to do was to change the basically the synaptic program that goes off in your brain when you hear that word, kill. So he was like, she's starting to perseverate on kill. So we need to change the meaning of kill. So we need to change that word from a thing you understand, kill means kill someone, into something that's going to confuse you. And that confusion lasted long enough to stop the virus from getting hold of her brain and taking over.
That's pretty wild, man. Like I had no lie, I had to rewind that a couple of times to figure out what was happening there, because I got a little lost. I was like, wait a minute, what is he doing? How's this going? Because he's just rapid firing at her. I mean, it did feel very Tarantino in that moment. I thought, what are we doing? And it could, I'm not gonna lie, I got confused on that. I had to wind back. So thank you for explaining it, because I wasn't really clear on it.
He was scrambling your brain at the same time he was scrambling her brain.
Yeah, I think my brain was a little scrambled for this anyway. I wasn't prepared for the Christopher Nolan version of a zombie movie. I wasn't prepared for Memento, the zombie movie, to have to think that actively in something, because I was sitting there going like, oh man, I thought I could just watch this and play on the phone at the same time. Nope, wrong.
Yeah, this is one of those movies that requires it might not necessarily require you to pay attention, but it welcomes you to pay attention. And at least for me, I found that it ends up being, even though I've seen it several times, it's still a very attention holding movie in a way that a lot of movies now aren't. So
let's say this got a big budget remake, Ron. Who would you recast in our 4 main roles here?
That's a great question. I feel like you could go for the Sidney Brier type. I feel like a Scream era Courtney Cox might have been able to play that pretty well.
Yeah.
I feel like for Laurel Ann, you could get any kind of fresh faced like ingenue type. But I would really like to see like a younger, and my reference is going to be all over the place. So maybe like a youngish Sarah Polley, like from Dawn of the Dead era Sarah Polley, who's also Canadian, but she has that nice blend of like, she's cute, but she's also obviously knows her stuff, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe like you could even go with like a Micah Monroe.
Yeah, I could see her being a good Laurel Ann. Yeah,
to make a today reference.
Yeah.
And as for Grant, I feel like Grant's going to be the one that's going to be hardest for me to like recast.
Yeah, because he is so. I mean, Stephen McHattie kind of owns this in a real specific way.
And I'm not sure who you could get that would have that kind of the blend of like crankiness and gravitas, and most importantly, that great like smooth whiskey voice.
Yeah.
And I don't know who really has that kind of voice anymore.
Yeah, it's not one that comes around much. I'm going to give you mine real quick, and this might blow your mind a little bit. Because she's played this role before. I'd put Rachel McAdams as the Sydney character, the producer, because I think she could do that. Laurel Ann, I'm going to go. Let's have some fun, and let's take like the Olivia Rodrigo type, like the little pop singer who's come on the scene. She's huge. Put her in there. Let her do that. For Dr. Mendez, I'm going to pull this one out. I'm actually going to reverse the casting. Dr. Mendez is going to become female in this, and Dimple Kapadia. If you've probably seen her in Tenet, she's been in a lot of other stuff too. She's an Indian actor, really, really interesting performer. Does cool stuff. I would put her there. And my Grant Manzi, I'm getting hopefully legal troubles aside, Alec Baldwin could do that. And could kill in it. But if you can't get him for obvious reasons, you could get one of his brothers and it would work. And I still think it would work. I think you've got to have someone who is not afraid to piss people off. And he definitely is that person, and could do that. And he's got the whiskey voice. He definitely does.
Yeah, I think Alec Baldwin would be a great choice.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Steven or Billy, but I feel like Alec Baldwin is the Baldwin you want to go for.
Yeah, I don't think Steven can pull this off. But yeah, Billy, the other thing too, if you can't get him, man, go find Gabriel Byrne.
Gabriel Byrne, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
I think he would be a real interesting one in this role, in a recast of this.
And I think the role I would actually like to recast is not is not the Good Doctor, but Ken in the Sunshine Chopper. I feel like he would be someone that you would like to get. And I think for Ken in the Sunshine Chopper, you need to go out and get an actual voice actor, because it's such a voice-based performance. And I feel like you could get like I would love to see Billy West do that.
That or give me Ryan Bartley, get her to come in and be the Sunshine Chopper, be Kim Leone. I would go for that. So
that would be fun.
Yeah.
Or we're completely neglecting the man with the man with the golden toilet, as we hate movies would say.
Roger Jackson.
No, but Roger Jackson actually might work as Roger Jackson actually might work. I don't know if he does a lot of screen acting, but
yeah, he would actually be a good DJ. Yeah,
he would be a good Grant. He might be a little too old for the part now, but I was thinking more of he's the guy who does the voice of Fred on Scooby Doo.
Who is Fred?
Welker.
Yeah, Frank Welker. Yeah, Frank Welker. Yeah, Frank Welker. Also the voice of the snake in the Anaconda movie. So,
if there's an animal making noises in a movie, it's Frank Welker. That's just it.
This is true. That's his.
And also, about half of the gadgets in movies is Frank Welker as well.
Yeah. He's half of the Transformer noises and other stuff like that, I think. So.
And I also feel like he could do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the voices of the possessed Pontypoolers.
Yeah.
He could throw some stuff out there.
Yeah. Get Eli Roth to do a couple of them too. He can do weird voice things. So
yeah, I think that would be fun. And I think you could actually get Eli Roth in the movie.
Yeah. He would be a good zombie. He would be a good director too. I would like Eli Roth to direct this. Nothing against Bruce McDonald, but let Eli direct this. I would go for that. Be kind of wild.
But do you want to do any of our other fun games? Specifically, since there are no needle drops in this movie, I thought we might want to have a performance segment.
Yes, I do have a William Shatner line reading, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Now, in our top story of today, a big, cold, dull, dark, white, empty, never-ending, blow my brains out, seasonal affective disorder, freaking kill me now weather front that'll last all day, or maybe when the wind shifts later on, we'll get a little greenhouse gas relief from the industrial south. Hail Mary, yea, though I walk through we go to Ken Leone in the Sunshine Chopper.
So my take was not a Shatner take, but I was going to just see what it sounded like if Grant Mazzy was like a wacky morning DJ stereotype. So please, you'll allow me here. But you know what, friends? We were never making sense today when Armageddon leached out into your good mornings. You know what? It's just another day. Another day in Pontypool. The sun came up. You did what you did yesterday, and it's exactly what you'll do tomorrow. Today's news, folks. Today's late baking, developing just across my desk news story is this. It's not the end of the world, folks. It's just the end of the day. This is Grant Mazzy for CLSY Radio Nowhere, and I'm still here, you cocksuckers.
Well done.
Thank you.
I think that works out well. So no, you're right though. There are no needle drops in this movie at all, and I'm disappointed by that because I needed some Canadian punk, and we didn't.
Unless you count the song from the Lawrence of Arabia musical, which just sounds awful.
Yeah,
but also is sets up one of the better like scares significantly later in the movie, where they're going upstairs and there's just that little girl sitting there. Mm-hmm. Waiting for them, the little girl from the Lawrence of Arabia musical.
Yeah, no, I remember it. I was kind of blown away. Well, I imagine though with the limited budget they had, they just didn't have money for anything. So,
yeah, I imagine that they just knew somebody who had a radio station, or they're like, "Hey, can we film this in your, here's $50."
It's disappointing that we couldn't get like a Sum 41 song or something like or a simple plan. They're the Canadians, so yeah.
Yeah, or just like some of the more wordy, tragically hip stuff.
Right. But
although given the environment, I feel like it's cold, it's dreary, everyone's sad. You should have gone with like the Weaker Thans or one of those like Canadian prairie.
Yes. Yeah. Weaker Thans would have worked well. So if you didn't want to go pure Canadian, go Front Bottoms too. You could get them in and really get your sad rock going. So
aren't they Welsh?
Yeah, but
because there's a Pontypool in Wales as well as a Pontypool in Canada.
So are they Welsh? I don't know. I thought they were from Connecticut. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Who even knows?
I only know like two of their songs. It doesn't matter. So I mean, no offense, guys. I like your stuff, but yeah. if by chance you're listening to this podcast.
If you're listening to this podcast, go ahead. We'll let you on. You can be on the podcast
anytime. You can review whatever you like in whatever language you like.
But speaking of language, I think that takes us to the point in the show where we give our final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. Jay, what do you got?
This movie was a surprise because, again, I didn't really know what it was. I just knew the basic premise and thought it was something else. And then I was surprised at how contained and smart it was, but also how untamed it was at the same time. So for that, I give it a lot of originality credit. And I feel like it is something that could be made into another thing, or we could get a sequel, or, any kind of spinoffs from it, or just a good fashionable remake like we talked about that could do well. And I think it's worth visiting, even just as it is, if it's just a one-shot deal, even with that really bizarre ending. And I need you to tell me what you think is happening at the end there, because that is like a level of weird that I wasn't ready for. But it was a good watch. I'm going to give it a medium popcorn, which I really didn't think would happen. Like 5 minutes into this, I was like, oh, okay, we're doing some small popcorn action, but that's okay. No, this is definitely medium popcorn. So I was pleasantly surprised with how smart it was and what it gave me.
They have been talking about doing a sequel to this, picking up the Lisa and Johnny Deadeye's role characters and going further into this post-apocalyptic language based to hellscape, basically since like 2012. So 12 years at this point, and it hasn't happened yet. And I feel like it's not going to happen, but it's kind of okay because I like what we have. I really like this movie. It's one of those movies that kind of sticks with you. It's one of those movies that I was definitely have been thinking about it since I watched it the last time. I know it's stuck with Holly. I feel like it's going to stick with you going forward, and I feel like it's really just an interesting example of what you can do with a clever idea and not a lot of money, but like a couple of really good actors and people who can really pull off the material that they're given. So for that, I'm going to give this a large popcorn. I will definitely rewatch it again, and I will definitely be paying attention a little bit more to how it's constructed, because I think it's constructed in a very interesting way. At one point, it was slated to be a War of the Worlds type radio drama that was turned into a movie, and I think it would really make a really good radio drama.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I personally, since I have dragged it kicking and screaming into the show, I'm very glad that you enjoyed it. And I'm very glad that it had such a big reaction, both in your head and in Holly's head, that it has left both of you two very smart, erudite people in a pretty confused state. I'm very pleased by that.
Yes, if that was your goal, mission accomplished.
Well, it's harder to make you cough until you die in the plot summary for a movie like this. So I'll settle for just really messing with your brain.
That'll work. Yeah. So as we're wrapping up the show here real quick, a couple of things I'll point people to. If you haven't checked it out, go to the Amateur Artours podcast. Our friend Mike over there and I have spent the last year and a half going through, great movies of every decade that I had never seen, going all the way back to the 1900s, all the way up to like the 2010s. And I don't think the 2010s one is out just yet, but we've done some real like big classics. We've done some obscure films in there, but it's been some neat stuff. So go to Amateur Artours. You can see me on, the different episode descriptions. Been a lot of fun. And then our friend Anthony and I from Tis the Podcast have just launched a kind of sideshow, but it's on both the Tis the Podcast feed and this feed, called Change My Movie Mind, where we each take a movie topic and then do a somewhat structured debate around it with a guest judge to be impartial to decide who should change their movie mind. And our first episode dropped at the beginning of February, and it was the whose filmography is more defendable, Zack Snyder's or Rob Zombie's. And you'll have to listen to the show to see who was judged the winner in that discussion.
Yes, Professor Zachary Snyder and Sir Robert of Zombie finally facing off for the title of the craziest filmography.
I don't even know how we framed it as that, but we did get our friend Sully from Jacked Up Review Show to come on and be our first judge, and we've got several other pod friends lined up throughout the year to do that. I know Tom and Julia are going to be a judge. We'll have to get you and Linz in to come be a judge at some point, and have some fun with that as we carry on. But that'll be a every month, every other month thing, depending on what our schedules allow and stuff. But yeah, other than those two things, man, just be hanging out here on Film Strip with y'all.
And I actually have something to plug. By the time this comes out, it will not have dropped yet, but the Rick and Michonne centric The Ones Who Lived Walking Dead spinoff is happening finally. And I'll have some features and a review of the first episode, spoiler-filled review of the first episode, and probably some feature ideas and some other stuff hitting up Den of Geek very shortly. So, it will not be out by the time this drops, but wait a week and it'll be there.
Very cool. Very cool.
But yes, speaking of things that you can find after you search up Jay's appearances on Amateur Outdoors, of course, you can find the show's social media at Film Strip Pod. We're on all the stuff. Please subscribe and tell others about the show, and as well as share the show wherever you can. You can find our podcast wherever fine pods are casted. Until next time, thanks for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.